It starts with a stillness, an eerie quiet that settles over the land like a held breath. Then, without warning, the calm fractures. A grizzly doesn't announce itself with noise, it arrives with force, driven by instinct and unshaken by fear. For those who wander too far, too deep, or too unaware, the encounter is swift and unforgettable. It's not about right or wrong. It's about presence, power, and primal law. In that split second, survival is no longer a theory. It's the only thought that matters. In the secluded estuary of Aniva Bay on the southern coast of Sakhalin Island, Russia, April 15, 2025, began as an ordinary spring morning for Marina Yershova, 38, and her 15-year-old son, Pavel. The region, known for its pristine wilderness and abundant salmon runs, had been the Yershova family's fishing grounds for generations. The estuary, flanked by dense taiga forest and rolling hills, had historically been a place where humans and wildlife maintained a respectful distance from one another. Marina, a marine biologist by training and a passionate angler by heritage, had decided to take Pavel fishing during his school break. They had launched their modest aluminum skiff, a dented but reliable 16-foot vessel her father had gifted her years ago, at dawn, when the water lay still like polished glass, reflecting the early morning sky. By mid-morning, their excursion had proven exceptionally fruitful. The skiff's floor was covered with glistening salmon, their silver scales catching the strengthening sunlight. The unusually large catch was attributable to the early spring run, which local fishermen had noted was particularly robust that year. Marina had been meticulous about keeping their catch fresh, periodically sprinkling water over the fish as the morning progressed. As the sun climbed higher, Marina decided they had caught more than enough. She guided their skiff toward a small, pebbly inlet, where they could safely pull ashore and organize their haul before heading back to the nearby village of Prigorodnoye. The scent of fresh fish hung heavily in the air as Marina partially beached the boat, leaving the stern floating in shallow water. Pavel began sorting their catch into coolers while Marina organized their fishing gear. Neither noticed the movement in the tree line 60 yards away, where a massive male grizzly bear had emerged, its powerful nose twitching at the enticing smell of fresh salmon. The bear, estimated later to weigh over 800 pounds, had likely awakened from hibernation recently and was desperately hungry after the long winter months. Wildlife biologists would later determine that the spring had been particularly harsh, with usual food sources scarce, pushing bears to venture closer to human settlements than typical. This particular bear showed signs of being older, with worn teeth suggesting it might have struggled to secure adequate nutrition through normal hunting. At around 11:37 a.m., the grizzly charged from the forest edge with surprising speed for its bulk. Pavel noticed it first. The sound of snapping branches caused him to look up from his task. The boy froze, the salmon in his hands slipping back to the pile as he watched the bear thunder across the beach toward them. Marina, hearing the commotion, turned to see the massive brown form barreling directly toward their small boat. With the instinctive reaction of a mother, she shouted for Pavel to run, while she positioned herself between the approaching predator and her son. The bear slammed into the aluminum boat with tremendous force, its powerful forelimbs crushing the thin metal hull as if it were paper. Fresh salmon scattered across the shoreline as the vessel partially collapsed. The bear, agitated and focused on the feast before it, began tearing through the crumpled boat to reach more fish. Marina frantically pushed Pavel away from the scene, instructing him to reach higher ground. The teenager stumbled backward several yards before the bear's attention shifted from the fish to the moving humans. According to Pavel's later account, given through an interpreter to wildlife authorities, the bear suddenly lunged past the wrecked boat directly toward him. Without hesitation, Marina threw herself into the bear's path, creating a barrier between the predator and her son. The grizzly's immense weight knocked her to the ground immediately. Fyodor Kozlovsky, 62, a veteran fisherman who had been checking his nets approximately 300 yards downshore, witnessed the attack through his binoculars. Seeing the unfolding tragedy,
He grabbed his hunting rifle from his own boat and began sprinting toward the scene. The bear's attack on Marina was swift and devastating. Its powerful jaws clamped onto her shoulder, while its claws inflicted severe lacerations across her torso. Pavel, now about 20 yards away, screamed for help, while picking up rocks to throw at the animal in a desperate attempt to distract it. Kozlovsky arrived minutes later, firing a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack echoed across the water, startling the bear enough to momentarily halt its attack. When the animal turned toward this new threat, Kozlovsky fired a second shot over its head, finally causing the grizzly to retreat toward the forest, where it disappeared among the trees. Despite Kozlovsky's immediate first aid efforts and Pavel's desperate attempts to help his mother, Marina's injuries proved too severe. She succumbed to her wounds on the beach before emergency services could arrive from Prigorodnoye, approximately 40 minutes later. In the days following the tragedy, Marina Yershova was hailed as a hero throughout the Sakhalin Oblast. Local authorities implemented immediate changes to fishing regulations in the region, requiring bear deterrents such as noisemakers and bear spray for anyone fishing within 5 kilometers of known bear habitat. Warning signs were posted throughout the area, and educational programs about bear safety were instituted in local schools. Wildlife officials tracked the bear for 3 days before locating and euthanizing it 12 kilometers from the attack site. Examination confirmed it was an older male in poor physical condition, likely making it more desperate and aggressive than typical for the species. Pavel Yevseyev, now in the care of his maternal grandparents, established a foundation in his mother's name dedicated to promoting safe coexistence between humans and wildlife on Sakhalin Island. The Marina Yershova Wildlife Safety Initiative continues to fund research and education programs throughout the Russian Far East. The aluminum skiff, crushed beyond repair, was preserved and now stands as the centerpiece of a small memorial erected at the Prigorodnoye village center, serving as a somber reminder of the power of nature and the sacrifice of a mother for her child. In the rugged wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska, October 12, 2023, marked a night that Thorvald Levi Johansson, 55, would never forget. The island, the largest in the Kodiak archipelago and the second largest in the United States, had been home to Johansson for nearly 2 decades. Known for hosting the largest subspecies of brown bear in the world, the mighty Kodiak bear, the island's dense forests and salmon-rich streams supported approximately 3,500 of these massive creatures, creating an uneasy coexistence between humans and bears. Johansson's cabin stood in a remote valley along the Karluk River, approximately 37 miles from the nearest settlement. The structure, hand-built by Johansson himself from local spruce logs and salvage materials, represented his commitment to a solitary lifestyle after retiring from his career as an environmental engineer in Anchorage. The one-room dwelling featured minimal amenities: a wood-burning stove, a handcrafted bed, and basic storage for his trapping and fishing equipment. That autumn had been unusually harsh, with early snow covering the island's mountains and temperatures dropping well below seasonal norms. Wildlife biologists would later report that the early winter conditions had disrupted the bear's typical feeding patterns, forcing many to extend their foraging range closer to human establishments before hibernation. Johansson had spent the day checking his trap lines, returning to his cabin exhausted as darkness fell. After a simple meal of smoked salmon and canned beans, he retired to his bed, wrapped in thick wool blankets against the encroaching cold. The cabin's only source of light came from the dying embers in the small wood stove near the opposite wall. At approximately 2:17 a.m., according to Johansson's later account to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, he was violently awakened by an explosive crashing sound from the rear of the cabin. Initially believing it to be a falling tree striking his home, he quickly realized the truth was far more terrifying. The back wall of the cabin, constructed of logs smaller than those used for the main structure, began to splinter and crack under tremendous pressure. Through the growing opening, Johansson could make out the massive form of a Kodiak bear,
its powerful shoulders and claws tearing through the wooden barrier as if it were cardboard. Wildlife officials would later determine the bear was a mature male, estimated to weigh over 1,200 pounds, an enormous specimen even by Kodiak standards. The animal had likely been attracted by the lingering smells of Johansson's dinner and the various animal hides from his trapping activities stored along the cabin's exterior. In the dim light, Johansson watched in horror as the bear created an opening large enough to push its enormous head through the splintered logs. The animal's breath condensed in the cold air as it snorted and sniffed, its small eyes adjusting to the cabin's interior. Within moments, the bear had created sufficient space to force its massive shoulders through the breach, wood cracking loudly as it entered the confined space. Johansson, still in his bed against the opposite wall, remained perfectly still as the bear fully entered his home. The animal moved with surprising caution, its claws clicking against the wooden floor as it investigated its new surroundings. The cabin, measuring only 12 by 16 feet, suddenly seemed impossibly small with the addition of the enormous predator. The bear, appearing disoriented in the unfamiliar environment, began methodically investigating the cabin, knocking over Johansson's small table and overturning his storage containers. Throughout this terrifying ordeal, Johansson maintained complete stillness, controlling his breathing despite his racing heart. It was when the bear turned its attention toward the bed that Johansson realized he needed to act. The animal approached, its massive head swinging from side to side as it picked up his scent. In a moment of clarity amid his terror, Johansson recalled the emergency flare gun he kept mounted beside the door for signaling emergencies. With the bear now less than 6 feet away, Johansson made his decision. In one fluid motion, he lunged from the bed toward the door, his hand finding the flare gun mounted on the wall. The sudden movement startled the bear, which responded with a deafening roar and a powerful swipe of its front paw. The bear's claws caught Johansson across his right side, tearing through his thermal shirt and into the flesh beneath. Ignoring the searing pain, Johansson raised the flare gun and fired directly above the bear's head. The confined space amplified the explosive sound as the flare ignited, filling the cabin with blinding red light and acrid smoke. The sudden sensory assault proved too much for the bear. With another roar, it turned and crashed back through the damaged wall, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Johansson, now bleeding from 4 deep lacerations across his ribs, barricaded the cabin's front door with his overturned table and pushed a heavy trunk against the destroyed rear wall. Using his satellite phone, the only communication technology available in the remote location, Johansson contacted emergency services in Kodiak City. Due to the remote location and deteriorating weather conditions, a rescue helicopter could not be dispatched until dawn. Throughout the remainder of the night, Johansson maintained his barricades while monitoring the perimeter of his cabin, applying rudimentary first aid to his wounds using supplies from his limited medical kit. The bear did not return, though Johansson reported hearing its movements in the nearby forest until approximately 4:30 a.m. At around 7:45 a.m., a Coast Guard helicopter located Johansson's cabin and transported him to Providence Kodiak Island Medical Center, where he received 27 stitches for his injuries. Wildlife authorities tracked the bear using paw prints and blood evidence, eventually locating it 3 miles from Johansson's cabin. Unlike many similar incidents, officials decided against euthanizing the animal, as it had likely entered the cabin out of hunger rather than aggression. Following his recovery, Johansson reinforced his cabin with metal sheeting and installed additional security measures. His experience became part of the Alaska Department of Fish and Game's bear safety educational materials, highlighting the increased risk of bear encounters during transitional seasons when the animal's feeding patterns change. Despite the trauma, Johansson continues to live in his remote cabin, maintaining a respectful caution toward his powerful neighbors. As he noted in his interview with the Kodiak Daily Mirror 6 months after the incident, the encounter reinforced his understanding that humans are merely visitors in the wilderness these magnificent creatures call home.
In the verdant wilderness of the Adirondack Mountains, New York, September 17, 2022, began as a perfect autumn day for hiking. The mountains, part of a protected park established in 1892 and encompassing over 6 million acres, represented the largest publicly protected area in the contiguous United States. Known for its spectacular fall foliage and extensive trail systems, the Adirondacks attracted thousands of outdoor enthusiasts each year, including Carl Davis, 48, and his girlfriend, Emily Winthrop Jones, 45. The couple had traveled from their home in Burlington, Vermont, for a weekend of hiking along the lesser-known eastern trails near Keene Valley. Davis, an accountant with a passion for photography, and Winthrop Jones, a high school biology teacher, were experienced hikers who had been exploring the Adirondacks together for the 3 years of their relationship. The trail they had chosen that morning, the Jackrabbit Trail Loop near Giant Mountain, was moderate in difficulty and generally well-trafficked during peak season. However, on this particular morning, they had set out unusually early, hoping to catch the perfect light for Davis's photography of the turning maple leaves. According to Winthrop Jones's subsequent account to the New York Department of Environmental Conservation officers, they had been hiking for approximately 2 hours when they decided to explore a small, unmarked side path. The narrow trail wound through a dense stand of hemlocks before opening into a secluded clearing filled with wild blueberry bushes. What the couple failed to notice was that they had inadvertently entered a feeding area frequently used by a black bear sow and her 2 cubs. The mother bear, estimated to weigh around 250 pounds, had been foraging with her young approximately 50 yards from where Davis and Winthrop Jones entered the clearing. Black bears, typically shy and avoidant of human contact, become particularly defensive when they perceive threats to their offspring. Wildlife biologists later determined that the bear's aggressive response was consistent with maternal protection behavior rather than predatory intent. As Davis set up his tripod to photograph the sunlight filtering through the canopy, Winthrop Jones wandered slightly ahead, collecting a few late-season blueberries. Neither was aware of the family of bears until a sudden crashing sound erupted from the undergrowth to their right. The mother bear, sensing potential danger to her cubs, charged into the clearing with remarkable speed. Davis, seeing the threat first, immediately called out to warn Winthrop Jones. Without hesitation, he moved between his girlfriend and the rapidly approaching bear, urging her to retreat toward the main trail. The bear, now fully committed to her charge, slammed into Davis with tremendous force, knocking him to the forest floor. The impact sent his camera equipment scattering across the clearing. As Winthrop Jones backed away in horror, Davis struggled to protect himself from the bear's powerful jaws and claws. Despite the ferocity of the attack, Davis continued to shout for Winthrop Jones to run to safety. Following his urgent instructions, she backed away toward the trail entrance, unable to assist but unwilling to completely abandon him. The bear, focused entirely on Davis, continued its violent assault, inflicting severe injuries to his neck, chest, and arms. Sarah Collins, 32, a wildlife photographer from Rochester who had been hiking alone approximately a quarter-mile away, heard the commotion and Davis's shouts. Recognizing the sounds of distress, she immediately hurried toward the source, carrying her bear spray. A small memorial stone now marks the junction where the side trail meets the main Jackrabbit Trail, bearing the inscription, "In memory of Carl Davis, whose final act was one of protection and love." The stone includes basic bear safety guidelines for hikers passing through the area. Sarah Collins, whose quick actions prevented further tragedy, later published a series of educational articles about bear encounters in outdoor magazines, featuring her photographs of black bears in their natural habitat. Her work emphasized the importance of respecting wildlife space and carrying proper deterrence when hiking in bear country. The tragic incident served as a somber reminder that even black bears, generally considered less dangerous than their brown or grizzly counterparts, can pose serious threats when they perceive dangers to their young.
In the expansive wilderness of Russia's Amur Oblast, July 27, 2019, began as a routine operation for a specialized environmental crimes unit of the regional police department. The region, stretching across 363,700 square kilometers of Russia's Far East, along the Chinese border, was known for its pristine taiga forests, mighty rivers, and abundant wildlife, including the formidable Ussuri brown bear, a subspecies of the grizzly bear known for its impressive size and strength. The five-officer team was led by Captain Yevgeny Alexeyevich Kuznetsov, 41, a decorated officer with 15 years of service in environmental protection. The unit had been dispatched to investigate reports of organized poaching activities near the Bureya River Nature Reserve, approximately 170 kilometers north of Blagoveshchensk, the regional capital. Local residents had reported suspicious activity, including gunshots and the movement of heavy vehicles during night hours in an area where hunting was strictly prohibited. Intelligence suggested the poachers were targeting Siberian tigers and Himalayan bears for the illegal wildlife trade, a persistent problem in the region due to its proximity to the Chinese border. The police team, consisting of Captain Kuznetsov, Lieutenants Mikhail Dragunov and Svetlana Orlova, and Sergeants Dmitry Vasilyev and Igor Petrov, had arrived at the remote location before dawn. They had hidden their vehicles 3 kilometers away and approached the suspected poaching site on foot to maintain the element of surprise. At approximately 6:15 a.m., according to the subsequent official report filed by Lieutenant Orlova, the team discovered an abandoned campsite in a small clearing. The site showed clear evidence of recent activity, including still warm fire embers, discarded animal remains, and empty ammunition casings. Most significantly, they found several bags containing animal parts, including bear gallbladders and tiger bones, prepared for transport. While the officers documented the evidence and secured the perimeter, Captain Kuznetsov directed Sergeants Vasilyev and Petrov to scout the immediate surroundings for any signs of the poachers' return or additional camps. The team maintained radio contact as they worked methodically through their assigned tasks. At around 7:22 a.m., as Captain Kuznetsov examined what appeared to be vehicle tracks leading away from the site, a massive Ussuri brown bear emerged suddenly from the dense undergrowth less than 20 meters away. The animal, a male later estimated to weigh approximately 700 kilograms, had likely been attracted by the scent of the processed animal remains at the poacher's camp. Lieutenant Dragunov, positioned closest to Captain Kuznetsov, immediately alerted the team to the bear's presence. Following standard protocol for wildlife encounters, Captain Kuznetsov instructed his colleagues to slowly back away while maintaining visual contact with the animal. The officers began a coordinated retreat, drawing their service weapons as a precautionary measure, but hoping to avoid confrontation. The bear, however, appeared agitated and disoriented. Wildlife experts would later suggest that the animal had possibly been wounded by poachers previously or had consumed bait laced with chemicals used by illegal hunters to incapacitate large predators. Whatever the cause, the bear's behavior quickly turned aggressive. With surprising speed for its enormous bulk, the bear charged directly toward Captain Kuznetsov. Lieutenant Dragunov fired 2 warning shots into the air, attempting to deter the charging animal, but the bear continued its advance unabated. Captain Kuznetsov discharged his own weapon, striking the bear in the shoulder, but the injury only seemed to intensify its rage. Before his colleagues could provide further assistance, the bear reached Captain Kuznetsov, knocking him to the ground with tremendous force. The other officers immediately opened fire, but their position relative to both the bear and their fallen leader made accurate shooting difficult without risking hitting Captain Kuznetsov. Lieutenant Orlova repositioned herself to get a clearer shot, while Lieutenant Dragunov attempted to distract the bear by shouting and waving his arms. Despite these efforts, the bear continued its savage attack on Captain Kuznetsov, inflicting catastrophic injuries with its powerful jaws and claws. The sergeants, hearing the gunfire over their radios, rushed back toward the campsite, arriving minutes later. With the additional officers present, they were able to coordinate a more effective response. After sustaining multiple gunshot wounds, the bear finally collapsed approximately 10 meters from Captain Kuznetsov's motionless form. Despite immediate first aid efforts and an emergency airlift to the regional hospital in Blagoveshchensk, Captain Yevgeny Kuznetsov was pronounced dead upon arrival. The post-mortem examination revealed extensive traumatic injuries, including a severed carotid artery and multiple fractures. Examination of the bear carcass confirmed initial suspicions. The animal had been previously wounded by what appeared to be a poacher's bullet that had become infected, likely contributing to its abnormal aggression. Toxicology tests also revealed traces of phenobarbital, a sedative commonly used by poachers to tranquilize animals for easier capture. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community across the Russian Far East. Captain Kuznetsov was posthumously awarded the Medal of Courage by the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, and a memorial was established at the regional police headquarters in Blagoveshchensk. In response to the incident, the ministry implemented comprehensive new safety protocols for environmental police units operating in wilderness areas. These included mandatory wildlife encounter training, the deployment of specialized bear deterrents, and requirements for larger team sizes when investigating potential poaching activities. The investigation into the poaching operation continued following Captain Kuznetsov's death, ultimately leading to the arrest of 7 individuals connected to an international wildlife trafficking syndicate operating across the Russia-China border. During the trial, prosecutors emphasized Captain Kuznetsov's sacrifice in the pursuit of environmental justice. Today, an annual award bearing Yevgeny Kuznetsov's name is presented to officers who demonstrate exceptional dedication to wildlife protection and environmental law enforcement throughout the Russian Federation, ensuring that his legacy of service continues despite his tragic end in the wilderness he had sworn to protect. In the vast frozen expanse of Norway's Svalbard archipelago, February 18, 2021, presented challenging conditions even by Arctic standards. The remote research station, Bjørnøya 7, situated on the northeastern coast of Spitsbergen Island at 79 degrees north latitude, stood as a solitary human outpost amid the polar wilderness. Established in 2015 by the Norwegian Polar Institute, the station was dedicated to monitoring climate change impacts on Arctic ecosystems and polar bear population dynamics. The region, characterized by perpetual darkness during the winter months and temperatures regularly plunging below -30 degrees Celsius, hosted one of the world's densest populations of polar bears. The Barents Sea subpopulation, estimated at approximately 2,000 bears, frequently used Spitsbergen's coastlines as hunting grounds when sea ice conditions permitted. Dr. Marcus Fenton, 42, a Swedish-American ecologist specializing in large predator behavior, was 3 months into his 6-month rotation at the station. With extensive field experience across both polar regions and multiple published papers on carnivore ecology, Fenton was considered one of the leading researchers in his field. The research team at Bjørnøya 7 consisted of 6 scientists during the winter season, each responsible for rotating shifts to monitor equipment and conduct observations. February 18th marked Fenton's turn on the midnight to 6 a.m. shift, the most challenging watch due to the complete darkness and extreme cold. According to the station's log, maintained by team leader Dr. Karina Volkov, weather conditions that night were particularly severe. A powerful Arctic storm system had descended upon the region, bringing wind speeds exceeding 70 kilometers per hour and reducing visibility to less than 5 meters. The temperature, with the wind chill factor, registered at -42 degrees Celsius. At approximately 2:15 a.m., Fenton suited up in his extreme weather gear to check one of the tracking stations located 200 meters from the main facility. This particular unit had been reporting inconsistent data throughout the previous day, potentially due to ice buildup on its sensors. Standard safety protocol required researchers to notify the station coordinator before any exterior excursion, carry a powerful flashlight, an emergency locator beacon, and both non-lethal and lethal bear deterrents. Dr. Anna Nakamura, 37, serving as that night's station coordinator, recorded Fenton's departure in the logbook. The communication system allowed them to maintain radio contact, with check-ins required every 10 minutes during exterior activities. Fenton's first 2 check-ins occurred normally, with him reporting successful de-icing of the primary sensor array. The third scheduled check-in never came. After 3 unanswered radio calls, Nakamura initiated emergency protocols, waking Dr. Conrad Bergstrom, the station's security officer. Together, they prepared to conduct a search operation, delayed briefly by the need to properly equip themselves against both the environmental conditions and potential bear encounters. 17 minutes after the missed check-in, they located Fenton approximately 150 meters from the main facility, halfway between the tracking station and safety. He was conscious, but severely injured, with deep lacerations across his torso and left arm. His emergency flare gun lay discharged nearby in the snow. Through labored breathing, Fenton reported encountering a large male polar bear that had emerged without warning from the blizzard. The bear, likely drawn by curiosity or the scent of the research station, had approached silently through the howling storm. Fenton had only noticed the animal when it was merely meters away, its cream-colored fur providing near-perfect camouflage in the swirling snow. Acting on his training, Fenton had attempted to retreat slowly while maintaining visual contact with the bear. However, the animal had charged suddenly, covering the short distance between them with alarming speed. Fenton managed to withdraw his flare gun and fire it as the bear made contact, the bright red illumination temporarily disorienting the animal and potentially saving his life. The polar bear had struck him once with its massive paw before the flare's bright light and noise prompted its retreat into the storm. The single blow had been sufficient to knock Fenton to the ground and tear through his protective clothing with its claws, leaving 4 deep parallel lacerations across his chest and upper arm. Bergstrom and Nakamura transported their injured colleague back to the station, where Dr. Elise Thorvaldsen, the team's physician, immediately began emergency treatment. The station's medical facility, though well-equipped for a remote location, was not prepared for injuries of this severity. Using the satellite communication system, Thorvaldsen consulted with trauma specialists at the University Hospital of North Norway in Tromsø. Due to the continuing storm, evacuation by helicopter was impossible. For 36 hours, the research team worked in shifts to stabilize Fenton, administering intravenous antibiotics, plasma substitutes, and morphine from their limited supplies. When weather conditions finally permitted, a Norwegian Coast Guard helicopter successfully evacuated him to Longyearbyen, Svalbard's administrative center, before continuing to Tromsø for comprehensive treatment. At the university hospital, Fenton underwent 6 hours of surgery to repair damaged muscle tissue and close the wounds. Doctors later reported that despite the severity of the lacerations, no major arteries had been severed, an outcome they described as remarkably fortunate given the typical force of a polar bear strike. Following the incident, the Norwegian Polar Institute commissioned a comprehensive safety review of all its Arctic research operations. The resulting policy changes included mandatory partner systems for any exterior activities, regardless of distance from facilities, enhanced bear detection systems using thermal imaging technology, and expanded training requirements for all field personnel. The polar bear responsible for the attack was never identified with certainty, though tracks found the following day suggested it had been a mature male, estimated at 600 kilograms. Unlike many bear attack incidents in populated areas, no effort was made to locate or euthanize the animal, as officials recognized it had exhibited normal behavior for its species when encountering humans in its natural habitat. After 4 months of recovery and rehabilitation, Dr. Marcus Fenton returned to field research, though he transferred his focus to marine mammal studies based primarily on shipborne expeditions rather than land stations. In interviews with National Geographic the following year, he emphasized that the incident had reinforced rather than diminished his respect for polar bears and their essential role in Arctic ecosystems. Fenton explained to the magazine that what happened that night was not an attack in the predatory sense. It was an encounter between two species in an environment where one belongs and the other is merely a visitor. The bear was simply being a bear. The tracking station that Fenton had been servicing during the incident was subsequently redesigned for remote operation, eliminating the need for physical checks during winter darkness. It continues to collect valuable data on climate change impacts in one of Earth's most rapidly transforming environments. In the ancient volcanic caldera that forms the heart of a park, August 5, 2018, dawned clear and promising. Established in 1872 as America's first park, it encompasses over 2.2 million acres across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Known for its geothermal features and abundant wildlife, including an estimated population of 150 grizzly bears, the park attracts millions of visitors annually from across the globe. David Mitchell, 34, an environmental lawyer from Portland, Oregon, had been planning his solo backpacking trip through the backcountry for months. An experienced hiker with previous expeditions in the Cascades, Olympic Peninsula, and Canadian Rockies, Mitchell had obtained all necessary permits and attended the mandatory safety briefing required for backcountry travel within the park. Mitchell's planned route would take him along the Specimen Ridge Trail, a challenging path known for spectacular views of the Lamar Valley, often called America's Serengeti for its abundant wildlife. The trail, categorized as strenuous by park authorities, sees significantly fewer hikers than the park's more accessible attractions, offering solitude that experienced backcountry enthusiasts like Mitchell cherish. According to Mitchell's subsequent report to park rangers, he had begun hiking shortly after sunrise, hoping to reach his designated campsite by mid-afternoon. The morning had progressed uneventfully as he traversed the ridge, documenting the diverse flora with his camera and observing distant herds of bison through binoculars. At approximately 10:45 a.m., as Mitchell rounded a bend in the trail where it descended through a section of lodgepole pines, the peaceful morning shattered. Later investigation by wildlife biologists determined that Mitchell had inadvertently approached an area where a female grizzly bear had been foraging with her yearling cub. Unlike black bears, which frequently climb trees when threatened, grizzly bears, particularly females with offspring, typically respond to perceived threats with aggressive charges. This evolutionary strategy has proven effective for millions of years in protecting their young from predators and competing male bears. The grizzly, emerging suddenly from a dense thicket of serviceberry bushes approximately 30 yards ahead on the trail, immediately adopted a defensive posture upon detecting Mitchell's presence. The bear, estimated to weigh around 350 pounds, stood upright momentarily to better assess the perceived threat before dropping to all fours. Mitchell, who had completed bear safety training before his trip, immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. Following recommended protocols, he began speaking in a calm, firm voice, while slowly reaching for the canister of bear spray attached to his belt. He avoided direct eye contact with the animal, which bears often interpret as a challenge, while attempting to back away gradually. The grizzly, however, likely interpreting his continued presence as a threat to her nearby cub, charged forward with the explosive speed characteristic of the species. Despite their bulk, grizzly bears can achieve speeds of 35 miles per hour, faster than any human can run. As the bear closed the distance between them, Mitchell deployed his bear spray, creating a cloud of aerosolized capsaicin compounds between himself and the charging animal. While the irritant caused the bear to hesitate momentarily, the wind conditions that morning proved unfavorable, dispersing much of the spray away from its target. The grizzly resumed its charge, covering the remaining distance in seconds. Mitchell, realizing the spray had been ineffective, attempted to protect himself by dropping to the ground in a fetal position, with his hands clasped behind his neck, the recommended position to minimize injuries during a bear attack when deterrents fail. The bear struck him with a powerful swipe of its front paw before he could fully assume the protective posture. The impact knocked Mitchell sideways off the trail and down a small embankment, tearing through his hiking pants and inflicting 4 deep lacerations along his outer thigh. The force of the blow also fractured his left fibula near the ankle. In what wildlife experts later described as surprisingly restrained behavior for a defensive attack, the bear did not pursue Mitchell down the embankment or continue its assault. Instead, after a warning vocalization described as a deep, woofing sound, the grizzly returned to its cub and retreated into the forest. Bleeding and in shock, Mitchell managed to activate the emergency satellite communicator he carried, transmitting an SOS signal with his GPS coordinates to park emergency services at around 10:53 a.m. He then applied a compression bandage from his first aid kit to the leg wounds while elevating the injured limb as best he could against the slope. Park rangers Justine Elkhart and Mecky Thomas, patrolling the northeastern section of the park, received the emergency notification and reached Mitchell's location approximately 47 minutes later. They stabilized his injuries, administered intravenous fluids for shock, and coordinated with the park's helicopter rescue team. At around 12:35 p.m., Mitchell was airlifted to Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center in Idaho Falls, where surgeons repaired damage to his quadriceps muscle and stabilized his fractured fibula. The lacerations, while deep, had missed major arteries and nerves, an outcome his attending physician, Dr. Elena Castillo, attributed to remarkable luck given the force these animals can generate. During his recovery, Mitchell worked closely with the park's Wildlife Management Division, providing detailed information about the encounter that proved valuable for ongoing research into bear-human interactions. The incident was classified as a defensive attack, and no attempt was made to locate or remove the bear from the ecosystem, as its behavior was considered a natural response to a perceived threat to its offspring. 6 months after the attack, having completed physical therapy for his injuries, Mitchell published an article in Backpacker magazine describing his experience. Rather than discouraging wilderness travel, his piece emphasized the importance of proper preparation, carrying appropriate safety equipment, and respecting wildlife space when venturing into bear country. Mitchell concluded his article with a perspective that resonated with many outdoor enthusiasts. The grizzly bear was simply being what evolution has perfectly designed it to be, a fierce protector of its young. The mountains and forests are their ancestral home, not ours. People are merely privileged visitors who must always remember their place in the natural order. Today, Mitchell continues to hike backcountry trails throughout North America, including return visits to the park. He now volunteers with the park's educational outreach program, sharing his experience with visitors during seasonal bear safety presentations at the Canyon Village Visitor Center.